Welcome to Midnight Historian, where we close our eyes, listen, and fall asleep to quiet history. I'm your narrator for the night, equal parts history nerd and pillow enthusiast. The goal is modest. Learn a little, laugh a little, and let your brain wander softly towards sleep. Tonight, we begin our tour of the Greek gods, not as marble statues with abs that could zest a lemon, but as ideas, instincts, and gloriously messy metaphors for human behavior. They argued, they loved unwisely, they invented consequences, and somehow, from their cosmic soap opera, we got weather, harvests, theater, morals, and at least 3 kinds of hubris. We'll start at the top of the food chain and the family tree, the sky, the lightning, the chair with the best view, the big cloud in charge, Zeus. Before we begin, if you truly enjoy these stories, hitting like or subscribe helps me keep making them, and hopefully helps you keep drifting off. Let me know where you're listening from tonight. I'm always amazed by the places people tune in. Now, get comfortable, take a slow breath in, and let it out. Because once this story begins, chances are you'll be asleep before it ends. Picture a mountain so tall, it keeps secrets with the stars. At the summit sits a figure wrapped in white and gold, like a storm pretending to be formal. That's Zeus, the cloud gatherer, the sky father, the reason umbrellas exist and oaths matter. His job description? Maintain cosmic order. His performance review? Outstanding, with recurring notes about boundaries. His origin story begins with a father who read the prophecy email and chose the least constructive option. Cronus, Titan of Time, heard a whisper that one of his children would overthrow him, so he swallowed them. Not figuratively, not with tough love. Literally, open mouth, insert infant, no chewing. Hera, Hestia, Demeter, Poseidon, Hades, down the hatch like divine vitamins. Rhea, their mother, grieved her nursery into silence, then got cunning. When Zeus was born, she wrapped a rock in a blanket and handed it to Cronus, who swallowed it without checking the return policy. Parenting tip: always count the toes. Baby Zeus got smuggled to a cave on Crete, where nymphs hushed his thunder practice, and a magical goat provided milk plus the seasonal special, the cornucopia, an accidental horn of plenty, created when toddler Zeus tugged too enthusiastically. Nothing says destiny like inventing infinite snacks by mistake. He grew up on mountain air and contingency plans. Then came the jailbreak. With help from clever Medi, Zeus served Cronus a herbal cocktail with the may cause retroactive parenting side effect. Cronus burped up a full set of adult children who dusted themselves off like, so, what did we miss? Family reunion, then revolution. The gods versus the titans, orders versus old habits, thunder versus inertia. When the sky cleared, Zeus got the sky, Poseidon got the sea, Hades got the underworld, and everyone got trust issues. From his throne of weather, Zeus set the thermostat of the world. Rain when grain prayed for it, lightning when oaths were broken, blue skies for festivals and mood lighting. He was king, not only because he could throw electricity like confetti, but because he could convene order, laws, hospitality, oaths. Ancient Greece took hospitality seriously. Travelers under your roof became sacred guests. Treat them well. And Zeus nodded. Betray them, and, well, your fig tree might suddenly meet a career-ending lightning bolt. Of course, he was also aggressively charismatic. Charisma is great for diplomacy and terrible for self-control. Zeus rarely walked past a complicated situation without becoming the complicated situation. He turned into a swan once, which is not a sentence any HR department wants to process. He turned into a golden shower, which is exactly as weird as it sounds, and an eagle, a bull, a gentle breeze, depending on the myth and how badly the plot needed a disguise. Power bends the rules. Desire forgets there were rules. Zeus often did both at once. So was he good or bad? Wrong question for an ancient god. Zeus is a system. Weather, law, authority. The part of human nature that says, let there be structure, and then immediately schedules a flexible exception. He's the executive branch of the cosmos with a flair for improv. He could be just, punishing oath breakers, protecting strangers, rewarding virtue. He could be petty, hearing an insult and responding with, what if hail? He could be tender, cradling rain like a gift onto fields that waited all winter. He could be reckless, letting a whim become a headline. His siblings learned to navigate him the way sailors read the sky. Watch the clouds, listen for the low rumble, batten down your pride. Hera matched his thunder with iron protocol. Poseidon challenged him with riptides of mood. Hades ignored the weather and ran a kingdom that never needed sunblock. And humanity, clever, delicate humanity, looked up, learned about promises, and invented roofs. In the quiet moments, Zeus loved order most. Festivals where communities became one voice, courts where words were weighed and balanced, hearths where strangers became guests, and guests became stories that lasted longer than bread. He loved eagles riding thermals, the clean slap of rain on parched earth, and the way lightning writes the sky in one fierce, brief truth. His worst habit? Mistaking the rush of power for the wisdom to use it. Lightning is decisive. Wisdom is patient. Eventually, he learned to trust counsel. Athena with her measured gaze. Themis with law, so old it spoke in roots. Hermes with the translation of everything into something two sides could agree on. That's how a storm becomes a climate, how a strong man becomes a statesman. Delegation, restraint, and the occasional strategic no. What did the Greeks see when they looked at Zeus? The weather that runs on nerves and nourishment, the law that binds strangers into neighbors, the father who is both shelter and shadow, the very human wish that someone, somewhere, is steering the sky. And what do we inherit from him now? Perhaps the reminder that power isn't just the ability to strike, it's the willingness to refrain. That authority without hospitality is just thunder with bad manners. That promises, like rain, matter most when they arrive on time. So, as your breath evens out, imagine that high chair on Olympus emptying of worry. The storm coils back into the bolt returns to the belt. Clouds soften into lamb's wool above sleeping valleys. A slow, kind rain begins somewhere that needs it. And the king of the sky, our walking metaphor for control and its limits, leans back and lets the world be gentle for a while. When we return, we'll go from crown to crown, the queen beside him. Hera doesn't throw lightning. She remembers who did and why, and what vows are supposed to mean. If Zeus is the storm, Hera is the weather report that always remembers what you did last season. She is the goddess of marriage, childbirth, and, let's be honest, public relations damage control for the entire pantheon. When Zeus lights up the sky, Hera keeps the minutes, writes the apology, and makes sure someone pays for it. Her throne sits beside his, gold carved with peacocks and pomegranates, symbols of beauty, loyalty, and suspiciously unspoken grudges. When she looks across Olympus, she doesn't see worshippers or mountains. She sees patterns. A mortal girl who looks too nervous, a nymph who's laughing too loudly, a thundercloud forming with her husband's handwriting all over it. The myths love to call her jealous, as if that's the whole story. But jealousy is just dignity's shadow. Hera isn't petty, she's consistent. If you promise fidelity and then turn into a swan, she will absolutely track that down, label it, and make sure you remember it forever. She is divine accountability, wrapped in couture vengeance. When Zeus disguised one of his flings as a cow, Hera pretended not to notice, then hired a guard with 100 eyes to watch it. The cow's name was Io, and the guard's name was Argus. And this is the part of the myth where you realize even farm animals need legal representation. When Hermes eventually freed Io, Hera placed Argus's eyes on the feathers of her sacred bird. That's the peacock. Every feather a memory, every memory a receipt. And then there's Heracles, or Hercules, if you prefer the Roman stage name. Zeus had him with a mortal woman, which was mistake number 1. Mistake number 2 was telling Hera about it. She responded by sending 2 snakes to the baby's crib, which, while extreme, was a level of parenting engagement Zeus never achieved. The child strangled the snakes, lived, and became a hero. So yes, Hera technically helped train him in resilience. Unintentionally. Still, for all her fury, Hera is not without mercy. She protects women in childbirth, guards the vows of marriage, and enforces promises between mortals. She is the divine enforcer of follow-through. When sailors prayed to Poseidon and merchants bribed Hermes, it was Hera who made sure their wives and families survived the waiting. She represents the human half of divine partnership, the quiet endurance required to keep a promise long after the ceremony. Her temples were among the oldest in Greece, older even than Zeus's. In Argos, women carried torches through the streets to honor her. In Samos, her festival lasted days, with offerings of honey cakes, flowers, and vows renewed under moonlight. She was no side character. She was Olympus's spine. But there's a tragic humor to her power. The goddess of marriage is trapped in a marriage that would make any therapist retire early. Imagine being in charge of sacred union while your husband invents new forms of avian flirtation. And yet, she stays. Not from weakness, but because leaving would mean abandoning the ideal she embodies. Hera can't walk away from marriage without walking away from herself. That's the curse of a symbol. When mortals told her stories, they weren't gossiping about an angry wife. They were confessing to the difficulty of commitment. They were saying, I too have loved something powerful that keeps breaking things. Hera's rage is the sound of devotion colliding with disappointment. It's the echo inside every human vow. And that's the secret. She isn't cruel. She's relentless. Hera demands respect, not because she needs it, but because the world forgets to give it. Her fury keeps Olympus honest. Without her, Zeus would never have to explain himself. Without her, marriage would be a punchline instead of a promise. So, as the clouds part and her crown catches the first flash of morning light, imagine her sitting on that golden throne. Perfect posture, perfect memory, and one eyebrow permanently raised. The Queen of Olympus, the Mother of Order, the patron saint of people who are right, but tired of proving it. And beside every storm, there is the silence that remembers. That silence had a crown, and her name was Hera. If Zeus is the CEO of Olympus, Poseidon is the sibling who bought a boat and insists it's a lifestyle. He rules the seas, earthquakes, and horses, which makes sense only if you've ever looked at a horse and thought, that seems aquatic. He is the god of motion, the ancient answer to the question, why does everything keep shifting just when I thought it was calm? When the sky belonged to Zeus and the underworld fell to Hades, Poseidon took what was left, the water between everything. It wasn't just an ocean, it was every current, every river, every well that whispered under the feet of mortals. While his brothers measured their realms in height and depth, Poseidon measured his in restlessness. His palace, deep beneath the waves, gleamed with coral and pearls, its walls shifting with light like the inside of an eyelid. There, dolphins carried messages, and sea nymphs sang in harmonic gossip. His throne wasn't carved from stone, but grown from living shell and driftwood. And when he spoke, even whales paused to listen, though half the time it was just to check if he was angry. Because here's the thing about Poseidon. His moods changed faster than the tide. When pleased, he could cradle sailors in silk-smooth water, leading them to safe harbors and full nets. When offended by arrogance, neglect, or an ill-timed insult, he could drown armies before breakfast. He was the original "do not test me" energy, but with better hair. His weapon was the trident, a three-pronged fork of impossible weight, forged by the Cyclopes during the Great Rebellion against the Titans. It could summon storms or split the earth in seconds. Some say he invented earthquakes simply because he ran out of ocean to throw tantrums in. When he struck the ground, mountains trembled and temples swayed, as if the whole planet remembered who kept it interesting. The Greeks both worshipped and feared him. Sailors offered black bulls before a voyage. Fishermen poured wine into the waves as tribute. They prayed not for calm seas, but for predictable moods, because with Poseidon, calmness wasn't peace, it was suspense. Even inland farmers left offerings, because his reach extended through rivers and springs, shaking their wells when he got dramatic. And dramatic he was. There was the time he competed with Athena for control of a city. Each god had to present a gift. Poseidon struck the rock with his trident and produced a fountain, but it was salt water. Athena offered an olive tree, useful, renewable, edible, basically the ancient Greek version of a multi-tool. The people chose her. Poseidon, in a display of emotional maturity, flooded the entire plain. It's the divine equivalent of losing an argument and flipping the table. Yet, he wasn't just anger and chaos. He was also the god of building, of expansion, of every new coast carved by time. Sailors didn't just fear him, they depended on him. He gave them wind when they needed it, islands when they were lost, and sometimes, if he was in a good mood, he let them see creatures that made them believe in wonder again. He was danger and salvation at the same time. Of course, like most of his family, Poseidon had a personal life that could fill several seasons of mythological daytime television. He loved nymphs, pursued mortals, and had a fondness for transformations that made biographers nervous. His encounter with Medusa, for example, turned her from a beautiful maiden into a creature cursed with serpents for hair, though that fallout was mostly Athena's doing. Still, Poseidon walked away from that story suspiciously dry. He had a pattern of creating legends and then swimming out of the frame before the consequences caught up. But in calmer tales, he was a builder. He raised the walls of Troy with Apollo before the war ever began, crafting beauty long before destruction. He guided sailors home through fog. He shaped islands where none existed and scattered pearls across the sea floor like breadcrumbs for dreamers. Poseidon was creation through motion. His connection to horses remains one of the stranger mythic mysteries. According to legend, He made the first horse out of seafoam and muscle, a creature that could run like a wave and breathe like thunder. Horses were his gift to mortals, freedom in the shape of power. And if you look closely at a galloping stallion, mane whipping like surf spray, you can almost see the ocean in its veins. In art, Poseidon often appears with that impossible mix of serenity and menace, beard flowing, eyes deep as shipwreck shadows. He isn't smiling, he isn't angry, he's thinking. Because for all his volatility, Poseidon represents the emotional body of the gods, the part that feels first and rationalizes later. He's the divine embodiment of every human surge of feeling that makes logic seem like an afterthought. Water, after all, is emotion made visible. It reflects, distorts, nourishes, and destroys. It holds memory, the shape of the last wind, the echo of storms long gone. Poseidon is that memory. When you stand at the edge of the ocean, watching waves collapse and rebuild endlessly, you're watching him think. He doesn't crave praise like Zeus or vengeance like Hera. He wants movement. He wants the world to stay alive by never staying still. That's his language. Change, flow, renewal through disturbance. Even the calmest sea is only pretending. Beneath the mirror, something is always shifting. And maybe that's why the Greeks feared him most. Because Poseidon didn't punish randomly. He reminded people how fragile their certainty was. You could pray for sunshine, plan for harvests, build temples by the coast, and in one afternoon, he could take it all back. He was the universe's quiet whisper. You control nothing, my friend. Which oddly enough, can be a kind of peace. So, when the night breeze carries the smell of salt and the sound of waves to your window, imagine Poseidon somewhere beneath it all, trident resting, temper cooled. The sea breathing slow, like a god asleep but dreaming of storms. The same tide that once swallowed cities now rocks the world gently to sleep. Because in the end, Poseidon isn't just the god of the sea. He's the reminder that emotion, when accepted, doesn't drown you, it moves you. That depth and fury can live side by side, that even the loudest waves eventually come home as whispers on the shore. And somewhere high above, Zeus listens to that ocean sigh and knows even the sky must rest on something. If Olympus is the party, Hades is the guy quietly handling cleanup downstairs. He rules the underworld, not hell, not punishment, just the waiting room of forever. He doesn't do flames or pitchforks, that's later, mythic branding. Hades runs logistics, the cosmic accounting department. Souls in, souls processed, souls filed properly. Efficiency so ruthless, it's practically compassion. When the three brothers divided the universe, Zeus got the sky, Poseidon got the sea, and Hades got what was left. Everything underneath. Most people would have asked for a redraw, but not him. He took it in silence and went to work. He built an empire of shadows, rivers, and rules, and never once demanded applause. The underworld is not chaos. It's a city that hums without sun. There's the river Styx for oaths, Acheron for sorrow, Lethe for forgetting, and Phlegethon for those who can't stop making things dramatic. The fields are endless, Asphodel for the ordinary souls, Elysium for heroes, Tartarus for those who really push their luck. It's not so much punishment as it is organization. Mortals feared his name so deeply they called him Platon, meaning the wealthy one, because underground everything valuable sleeps: gold, silver, roots, seeds, secrets. He wasn't grim, he was patient. Every buried thing eventually came to him. That's not cruelty, that's gravity. He had a palace carved from obsidian, quiet as deep thought. The torches burned blue, the floors reflected nothing, and the silence was so thick it became a kind of music. He ruled beside Persephone, his queen, who brought a flicker of spring into the endless dusk. Their story begins terribly: a kidnapping, an abduction. Hades saw her picking flowers, the ground opened, and down she went. Not a great meet cute, but over time, something unexpected happened. Persephone adapted. She brought life to the dead land, and Hades, unlike most of his relatives, actually listened. When she spoke, he didn't interrupt. When she ruled, he didn't compete. He gave her half the year above ground, half below. The world learned seasons from that compromise, life and death taking turns holding the same hand. So, was Hades cruel? Number. He just wasn't social. He didn't visit Olympus often. He didn't start wars or chase mortals or attend family dinners where Zeus inevitably turned into an eagle halfway through dessert. He had work to do, making sure the dead stayed dead and the living stayed grateful. That's why mortals built no temples for him. They weren't ungrateful. They were cautious. You don't invite Hades to the party because he is the after party. You leave a small corner of your meal uneaten and whisper a thank you, just in case he's listening. He had a dog, of course, Cerberus. 3 heads, 1 personality. Loyal, terrifying, and constantly shedding. Cerberus was less guard dog and more existential reminder. You can leave life, but you can't leave the afterlife. Even Orpheus, with all his music, had to look back eventually. That was the rule, and Hades loves rules. They make eternity manageable. He's often painted as lonely, but maybe he wasn't. His realm was full. Millions of souls whispering stories every hour. He heard regrets, memories, promises. He saw how quickly mortals forgot what they once loved. Down there, no one lied anymore. Hades was surrounded by truth, stripped bare of ego, and if truth is solitude, then solitude was his crown. There's something oddly comforting about him. He doesn't chase anyone. He doesn't strike anyone. He just waits. He's the quiet presence that says, "It's okay. Everything ends, and that's what keeps it beautiful." And honestly, that's kind of profound. The ancient Greeks saw Hades not as a villain, but as the necessary opposite of chaos above. Zeus ruled power, Poseidon ruled passion, Hades ruled permanence. He's the god who keeps the lights off, because sometimes darkness is where you finally rest. Even Persephone came to love the rhythm of their strange balance. Half a year above, half below, half birth, half decay. It's not tragedy, it's the heartbeat of existence. And Hades, the supposed god of death, keeps that pulse steady. He's not the enemy of life, he's its frame. When you stand at a grave, it's not Hades who chills you, it's recognition. He's there, yes, but so are you, reflected in the stillness. He's the whisper that says, "Be kind, because this is brief," and maybe that's his greatest mercy. So as the night deepens and the noise of the world sinks into quiet, picture him sitting on his dark throne, listening, not judging, just keeping count. The quietest of gods, the keeper of endings, which are really just beginnings, with better organization. And above his kingdom, the roots of every tree drink from his patience. Every grain of soil remembers him. Every dream that ends finds its way through his holes before turning into morning again. Because Hades doesn't take life, he completes it. And in doing so, he reminds us, even endings can be peaceful when the paperwork's in order. If Olympus had performance reviews, Athena would write them. She is the goddess of wisdom, strategy, and everything that requires both patience and precision. Born, fully grown, and fully armed from Zeus's forehead, which, by the way, is the most dramatic migraine in history. Athena arrived into the world with the sword in one hand and a plan in the other. She is logic given shape. Where Ares represents chaos, Athena represents choreography, the war room instead of the battlefield, the diagram instead of the scream. While her brother charges in shouting, she calculates where his spear will land before he even throws it. If Ares is a bonfire, Athena is a forge, controlled heat with purpose. Her birth story alone sets the tone. Zeus had swallowed her mother, Metis, after a prophecy warned that any child she bore would surpass him. Classic Zeus move, eat the problem. But instead of disappearing, Metis worked quietly inside his mind, crafting wisdom like a blacksmith in the dark. When Zeus's headaches grew unbearable, Hephaestus cracked open his skull with an axe and outstepped Athena, radiant and calm, like an idea finally finding words. Athena's armor shines, not because it's decorative, but because it's reflective. It mirrors her enemies back at themselves. In battle, she doesn't shout. She listens. She watches. She waits for the pattern to reveal itself, because wisdom, to her, isn't knowledge, it's timing. She guided heroes, not soldiers. Odysseus, clever and cursed with overthinking, was her favorite. She didn't give him strength, she gave him restraint. While everyone else chased glory, she taught him how to survive by thinking sideways. She whispered through storms, disguised herself as strangers, and pulled him home through every trick and temptation. Without Athena, the Odyssey would have been a short poem titled, "Guy Drowns Immediately." Athena's name was invoked before wars, before speeches, before plans. Not because people wanted miracles, but because they wanted clarity. She represents that quiet breath before decision, the instant when the mind steadies and the heart obeys. In her temples, owls roosted in the rafters, symbols of night vision and discernment. Owls see through darkness without fear. Athena does the same thing, but with human nature. Of course, even the goddess of logic had her limits. When a mortal girl named Arachne claimed she could outweave her, Athena gave her a fair chance. They both sat at their looms, thread flying like sunlight. Arachne's tapestry was flawless, and worse, it told the truth about the gods and their misdeeds. Athena didn't rage, she flinched. Truth is uncomfortable, even for wisdom itself. She turned Arachne into a spider, not as punishment, but as endurance. To weave forever is both curse and calling. That's the complexity of Athena. She doesn't crave worship, she craves understanding. Her city, Athens, chose her gift, an olive tree, over Poseidon's saltwater spring. The olive was practical: food, oil, fire, peace. Poseidon's gift was dramatic and useless, which frankly describes most of his relationships. Athena's victory was quiet, pragmatic, and eternal. Even today, the olive branch is her symbol of diplomacy, reason extending a hand across conflict. She never married, never loved, never lost herself to desire. While Aphrodite ruled hearts, Athena ruled minds. Her virginity wasn't purity, it was autonomy. It meant no one could claim her, define her, or distract her. She was self-contained, an empire of intellect. And in a pantheon of egos and scandals, that made her almost alien. Yet Athena wasn't cold. She was protective in her own precise way. To the Greeks, she was the patron of craftsmen and artisans, the builders, the thinkers, the doers. She valued skill over status. If you could carve a statue, forge a blade, or write a strategy, she was already in the room, nodding quietly in approval. Her most striking trait wasn't power, it was balance. She held both the sword and the scroll, the war and the word. Her presence was the reminder that strength without strategy is just noise. In every city-state that prayed to her, they didn't ask for victory, they asked to deserve it. And perhaps that's why she feels so modern. Athena doesn't command faith through fear, she earns it through competence. She's the goddess of, "I've already thought about that," the divine equivalent of a calm project manager. If Zeus represents power and Poseidon represents emotion, Athena represents composure. She's what happens when reason wears armor, but never forgets empathy. Picture her now, standing on the walls of Athens, golden in the fading light. Her spear points downward, not in threat, but in readiness. The owl lands on her shoulder. The wind stills, waiting. In her eyes, you see the reflection of every thinker who ever asked, "What's the wiser way?" And that's her gift, the calm voice inside the storm, the blueprint inside the battle, the moment when chaos slows, just long enough to understand it. Athena doesn't stop the noise. She teaches you to hear the pattern beneath it. The battlefield doesn't begin with swords. It begins with breath, the kind that shakes your ribs and tastes like iron. When the Greeks imagined war, they didn't picture banners or speeches. They pictured Ares, stepping onto the plain in bronze and blood, a grin that could cut through armor. He's the god of conflict, pure, unfiltered, and often misunderstood. Most gods represent something useful to humans. Athena brings wisdom, Demeter gives grain, Poseidon controls the sea. Ares, he brings noise, the ache, the mess. He's not the strategy of war, he's the scream of it. And yet, without him, the story of humanity would be missing its most brutal honesty. Imagine the dust, the clang of shields, the smell of sweat, salt, and fear mixing like bad wine. Somewhere in that chaos, Ares is laughing, wild, terrifying, alive. He loves the momentum, not the motive. For him, war isn't politics, it's pulse. But here's what makes him fascinating. The Greeks didn't really like him. Even the Spartans, who built their whole brand on combat, were careful when invoking his name. He was necessary, not admirable. The poets called him Ares the blood-stained, breaker of men, and sacker of cities. Even Zeus, who's not exactly shy about thunder and power, called Ares the most hateful of all the gods. That's rough, coming from your own dad. Still, the Greeks couldn't look away, because Ares represented something too real to ignore, the part of us that fights even when it knows better. He's that flicker of rage in traffic, that argument you keep replaying hours later, that reflex to clench your jaw instead of your hand. Ares isn't just war, he's confrontation, and he lives in everyone who's ever had to stand up for something, even at a cost. He marched into battle with his two favorite companions, Deimos and Phobos, terror and fear. They weren't metaphors, they were his sons. They charged beside him, feeding on panic, amplifying it like feedback from the universe's most violent microphone. And still, Ares didn't hate them. He accepted them. To him, fear was part of courage. You can't have one without the other. The gods often rolled their eyes at him. Athena saw him as reckless, Apollo as uncivilized, Hephaestus as expensive to repair after every rampage. But Aphrodite, she saw something else. When the goddess of love looked at the god of war, she didn't see destruction, she saw honesty. And so began one of Olympus's strangest romances. It wasn't tender, it wasn't wise, it was atomic. Their affair was the meeting of two forces that should never touch, but can't stay apart. Love and war. The ancient poets said their union produced Eros, the god of desire. Makes sense, doesn't it? Every act of love carries a bit of battle. Every fight hides a plea to be understood. Ares and Aphrodite weren't opposites, they were mirrors, each reminding the other that passion and pain share the same heartbeat. Their secret didn't stay secret long. Helios, the sun, saw everything, as nosy, celestial bodies tend to do, and told Hephaestus, Aphrodite's husband. The blacksmith god forged a net so fine it was invisible and so strong it couldn't be broken. He caught them mid-embrace, tangled and glowing, as the other gods gathered to laugh. Only Poseidon, yes, the Sea King himself, spoke up in defense. Let them go. Love and war always end the same way, quietly. And just like that, they did. Ares fled to Thrace, his spiritual homeland where the people understood his language of blood and thunder. But Aphrodite's presence lingered like perfume on armor. He never stopped wanting her, never stopped being shaped by what she represented. Beauty that refused to yield. That's what makes Ares more than a brute. He's not just violence for violence's sake. He's the recognition that chaos has rhythm, that rage can be honest, and that sometimes destruction is how we start again. The Greeks didn't worship him because they wanted to fight. They worshipped him because they already were fighting against time, fate, fear, themselves. In art, Ares is young, strong, radiant, but look closer and you'll see something tragic behind the eyes. He's immortal, yet never satisfied. Every battle ends the same way. Bodies cooling in the dust, and Ares standing there, victorious and empty. That's the loneliness of conflict. You win, and then what? The field goes quiet, and all that's left is the echo of your own heartbeat. Athena wins wars with strategy. Ares survives them by remembering what they cost. They're two sides of human nature, mind and muscle, reason and instinct. Without her, wars would never end. Without him, they'd never begin. Together, they define the limits of courage. Ares is also, strangely, the god of rebellion. Every uprising, every revolution, every moment someone says no to power, that's him whispering through clenched teeth. His domain isn't just spears and shields, it's the courage to resist, even when the odds are ridiculous. The Greeks feared him, but they also knew he'd stand beside them in the last moment before surrender. So, yes, Ares is loud, he's violent, he's a terrible dinner guest, but he's also proof that anger isn't evil when it has purpose. When wielded carefully, it's the spark that defends the weak, the force that topples tyrants, the heat that forges change. He's not chaos for chaos's sake. He's the reminder that passion and destruction often share a door, and sometimes it's the only one left to open. And when the dust settles and the field is empty again, Ares doesn't roar. He listens. The silence after war isn't peace, it's exhaustion. And even he knows that the bravest warriors are the ones who can lay their weapons down. That's the paradox of Ares. He's the god of conflict who secretly longs for calm, the one who bleeds for the right to stop bleeding. In that sense, maybe he's not hateful at all. Maybe he's just tired. If love had a sound, it would probably be the ocean. Soft, endless, and occasionally loud enough to destroy a city. Aphrodite didn't need to be born the usual way. She didn't crawl out of caves or fall from Olympus. She simply appeared formed from the seafoam that bubbled up when Uranus's severed parts hit the water. Yeah, romantic origin story if you ignore the part about celestial dismemberment. From that foam rose something no god had planned. Beauty so disarming it felt like sunlight turning into a person. She stepped onto the shore, hair dripping gold, doves circling like confetti, and the world changed temperature. The Greeks said flowers bloomed beneath her feet because nature itself couldn't help but show off. Aphrodite wasn't just beautiful, she was beauty. Not the kind you measure, but the kind that hijacks your pulse. When she walked through Olympus, even the gods forgot what they were arguing about. Thunder went quiet. Waves stilled. Hammers stopped mid-strike. It wasn't submission, it was awe. The kind of silence that happens when every cell in your body remembers what it's for. But here's the trick. Beauty isn't harmless. It rearranges things. It makes you want, and wanting makes you dangerous. Aphrodite didn't invent desire, she just made everyone aware of it. To love her was to be reminded how fragile control really is. She married Hephaestus, the god of the forge, solid, kind, practical, the ancient equivalent of settling down with the dependable accountant. But passion doesn't respect logic. Aphrodite's heart, and let's be honest, her schedule, belonged to Ares, the god of war and the goddess of love, the universe's most predictable plot twist. When they were together, the air itself seemed to crackle. Every fight between them ended in a kiss, and every kiss started another war. She didn't need armies, she had glances. One raised eyebrow from Aphrodite could cause more chaos than Ares on his best day. Paris found that out the hard way when she promised him the most beautiful woman in the world, Helen. That small favor led to a little incident called the Trojan War. 10 years of ships, spears, and broken oaths, all because one goddess decided to make someone feel special. And yet, despite the destruction, mortals never stopped worshipping her. They couldn't, because to deny Aphrodite was to deny the ache that makes us human. Every poem, every painting, every love song, she's in all of them, smirking. She knew desire wasn't about ownership. It was about motion, how love keeps us moving toward each other, even when it hurts. Her most human story was Adonis, a mortal so beautiful that even Aphrodite forgot she was divine for a while. She hid him in a chest to protect him from the world, which, in mythic terms, is how you guarantee tragedy. He grew up hunting, fearless and foolish, and one day he was gored by a wild boar. Aphrodite ran to him, barefoot, blood mixing with tears. From that mixture, red anemones bloomed, the flowers of brief beauty. Every spring, they return, and with them, the memory of love that couldn't last, but still mattered. That's her magic. Aphrodite doesn't promise forever. She promises feeling. The Greeks understood that perfectly. They never treated love as comfort, but as revelation. Love exposes, it tests, it humbles. It makes philosophers out of fools, and fools out of philosophers. That's why even the wisest, Athena, Hera, Zeus, were vulnerable to her influence. No armor stops a heartbeat. The goddess of beauty wasn't vain. She was curious. She wanted to know why humans kept chasing something they knew would fade. She saw how mortals clung to love as if it were proof against time. And in her own way, she envied them. Because gods don't age, don't lose, don't ache the way humans do. And without loss, how could love mean anything? Her temples were filled not with silence but laughter, perfume and music. Priestesses danced, sailors prayed before voyages, married couples left offerings, not for faithfulness, but for forgiveness, because love, real love, always leaves a little wreckage behind, and Aphrodite accepted it all. She didn't want devotion without desire. She wanted people to risk heartbreak, because that was proof of life. In art, she stands serene, unclothed, impossibly composed. But that calm hides a paradox. She causes storms just by being still. She is the pulse under poetry, the ache behind beauty, the reason we keep staring even when it hurts. Every sigh, every foolish crush, every song that makes you think of someone you shouldn't, she's there, not judging, just smiling. Because every kind of love, pure, messy, doomed, still worships her. And maybe that's her true domain. Not perfection, not power, but forgiveness. Every love story, even the tragic ones, hides a god waiting to be forgiven. Aphrodite reminds us that desire isn't a sin, it's evidence. Evidence that we're alive enough to reach for something impossible and call it beautiful anyway. So when the sea whispers tonight, imagine her walking across it, calm, barefoot, gold light bending around her. She doesn't look back. She never has to, because everything that loves her already. If Olympus were a company, Hermes would be that one employee who somehow knows everyone's business, delivers every memo on time, and still manages to prank the boss before lunch. He's the god of messages, mischief, travelers, trade, and the spaces in between, because someone had to handle all the cosmic paperwork. Hermes is what happens when intelligence moves fast enough to become charm. He was born at dawn and caused trouble before sunset. His mother, Maya, barely had time to swaddle him before he slipped away to steal Apollo's cattle. Picture it, an infant, still glowing from divine birth, tiptoeing out of his cradle with the confidence of a seasoned thief. He led the cows backward to confuse the tracks, invented sandals to hide his footprints, and when Apollo caught him, Hermes pretended to be an innocent baby who couldn't possibly spell larceny. Classic youngest child energy. Apollo was furious. Hermes just smiled and invented music on the spot to calm him down, plucking the first tune ever from a turtle shell strung with sheep guts. That's Hermes in a nutshell. Break a rule, then charm your way out of the consequences by inventing something useful. He's the reason the world has trade, language, negotiation, and probably sarcasm. The Greeks loved him because he wasn't above them. He was like them, only faster. He carried messages between gods and mortals, between Olympus and the underworld, between dreams and waking. While other gods demanded temples, Hermes demanded movement. His shrines were milestones on roads where travelers left small offerings for luck, a pebble, a coin, a prayer muttered under breath. He was the divine GPS of the ancient world. But his real domain was the in-between. He ruled thresholds, the moments when things shift but haven't settled yet. Crossroads, doorways, twilight, negotiation, all of it belonged to him. Even death needed Hermes. He was the psychopomp, the guide of souls, leading them gently to Hades without fear or ceremony. He didn't judge. He just walked beside them until the darkness turned familiar. Unlike Zeus's thunder or Ares's roar, Hermes's power was subtle. He moved in whispers and glances. He understood that real influence doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just arrives first. That's why he became the god of communication. Every story, every rumor, every message, he delivered them all, fast and smiling, leaving confusion and connection in equal measure. He wore winged sandals and a traveler's hat, carrying a staff called the caduceus, two snakes twined in perfect balance. That image became a symbol of medicine because Hermes understood healing too. Communication, after all, is a kind of medicine. To speak is to bridge distance. To listen is to heal it. Mortals prayed to him before setting out on journeys, before making deals, before lying, because Hermes doesn't judge the moral weight of words, only how skillfully they're delivered. He was patron saint of merchants and thieves alike, which might sound contradictory, but to Hermes, both are just people trying to make an exchange. One gives a story, the other takes a wallet, details. He had a sense of humor that bordered on divine trolling. When Zeus wanted to hide one of his many affairs, Hermes was the guy who arranged the logistics, disguises, distractions, plausible deniability. When Hera wanted revenge, Hermes was conveniently out delivering messages. He survived Olympus's politics because he treated the whole thing like a cosmic comedy. But Hermes wasn't just laughter and speed. He had empathy too, the kind born from constant motion. He saw the loneliness of travelers, the silence between lovers, the fear of those walking into the dark. He didn't fix it, he accompanied it. He understood that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is walk beside someone without trying to change their direction. That's why, in myths, he's one of the few gods mortals actually liked. He didn't punish them, didn't demand devotion. He just showed up when they needed help getting somewhere, physically or emotionally. If you had a boundary to cross, Hermes was your guy. Between cities, between lives, between choices, he ruled motion itself, the sacred act of becoming. Even the gods needed him. Ares needed his discretion. Apollo needed his charm. Hades needed his calm. And Zeus, well, Zeus needed plausible deniability. Hermes was the only one who could move freely through every world and still be welcomed with a grin. He was divine neutrality, an agent of balance disguised as chaos. But every trickster hides wisdom in the joke. Hermes teaches that movement is truth, stagnation is death. Every time you change your mind, start a new journey, learn a new language, tell a secret, or forgive yourself, Hermes is there, nodding from the corner, saying, "Good, keep going." And maybe that's why, as I listen to his laughter echo through the air, I realize he's been telling my story all along. Because we all live between worlds, between who we were and who we're becoming, between what we said and what we meant, between memory and myth. Hermes doesn't ask us to choose. He just reminds us to keep moving. It begins with a mother calling a name into the wind. The echo answers, but her daughter does not. They say the earth itself froze that day. The wheat turned pale, the rivers slowed, and Demeter, the goddess of harvest, of life, of everything green, stopped moving, because somewhere under her feet, the world had taken her child. I've always thought that grief sounds like winter, not cold exactly, just still. It's what happens when motion forgets itself. And Demeter knew that silence too well. Persephone had been plucking flowers in a field when the ground cracked open, and Hades rose from the dark in a chariot of obsidian. He reached out his hand, the earth closed again, and by the time the petals hit the soil, she was gone. The world didn't break with thunder that day. It broke quietly. Demeter searched every corner of the earth, torch in hand, disguised as an old woman, so no one would fear her grief. Everywhere she went, she asked the same question, and every answer came with lowered eyes. The gods watched, but none intervened. Zeus, busy as ever with storms and scandals, said it was complicated. It always is when someone else's heart is breaking. Demeter wandered until the torches burned out, the crops withered with her. Mortals began to starve, and still she searched, whispering her daughter's name into soil that no longer answered. The earth became a mirror of her heart, empty, exhausted, waiting for return. And in the shadows, Persephone changed. Hades did not chain her or threaten her. He simply waited. The underworld was quiet, organized, strangely peaceful. She began to see beauty in its stillness, the soft glow of the asphodel fields, the low hum of the rivers, the way souls moved like drifting embers, calm and unafraid. Hades gave her a throne beside his own, not as captive, but as queen. Still, she missed the sun. When Hermes arrived, yes, our wing-footed mediator again, carrying Demeter's plea for her return, Persephone's heart leapt. But there was one condition. She had eaten 6 pomegranate seeds, 6 small tastes of the underworld. And once you've tasted something from the dark, part of you always belongs there. So they struck a deal. Half the year with her mother, half with her husband. Spring and summer for life, autumn and winter for reflection. The seasons themselves became a mother's compromise. Demeter agreed, though every goodbye still cracked her in two. When Persephone rose from the earth each spring, flowers followed her footsteps. When she descended, leaves fell in mourning. And it's strange, but I see myself in both of them. In Demeter, the part that refuses to let go. In Persephone, the part that knows she must. That's the truth of grief. It doesn't end, it just cycles. It freezes, it thaws, it blooms again. I think about how Demeter must have looked at the first sprout of green after the famine, the fragile proof that love can return from absence. And I think about Persephone's descent, walking willingly into the underworld now, torch in hand, knowing her mother's sorrow, but also her own strength. Both women learned the same truth in different rooms. Life isn't a straight line. It's a circle drawn with tears and sunlight. Sometimes I imagine standing beside Demeter in a field of gold, hearing her laugh again for the first time in months, the way she'd turn to the sky and whisper, "She's home." And then, when the air cools, when the leaves turn, she'd close her eyes, breathe deep, and whisper, "She'll be back." There's peace in knowing that even endings have appointments to keep. We talk about grief like it's an illness, something to recover from. But the Greeks didn't see it that way. To them, Demeter's sorrow was sacred. It fed the rhythm of the world. Without her mourning, nothing would grow again. Her pain became nourishment. Her love became law. And Persephone's time below, maybe that's not tragedy either. Maybe she became the bridge we all need someday, the part of ourselves that can walk into darkness and not be consumed by it. To stand in loss, learn its language, and still rise again in spring. That's not despair. That's evolution. I've spent years walking between those two states, between the Demeter in me that holds on and the Persephone in me that lets go, between warmth and shadow, between memory and forgiveness. And in that rhythm, I began to see time itself breathing. So now, when the earth grows quiet and everything looks bare, I don't rush to mourn. I remember that even the gods had to learn patience. Winter is only grief taking a nap. Spring will wake it kindly. And when it does, you'll know. You'll feel it in your bones, the first warmth returning, the ache softening into something almost like joy. Because every loss has two sides, the ache and the return, and between them, like Persephone between worlds, is where we live. If the Greeks had invented therapy, Dionysus would have been fired for turning every session into a party. He was the god of wine, madness, theater, and liberation, the ecstatic undoing of all the rules the other gods spent centuries inventing. He didn't care for temples or rituals or hierarchies. He cared about release. He was the divine permission slip that said, "Let go." When I first learned about Dionysus, I thought he was just the drunk uncle of Olympus. But the longer I study him, the more I see a strange kind of wisdom in his chaos. He wasn't about indulgence for its own sake. He was about surrender, the art of dissolving the masks that life forces us to wear. He wasn't born normally either. No one on Olympus really is. His mother Semele was mortal, a princess who caught Zeus's wandering attention. When Hera found out, she disguised herself and convinced Semele to ask Zeus to reveal his true godly form. The result? Instant vaporization. Lightning doesn't do foreplay. But Zeus, feeling guilty, or maybe just curious, saved the unborn child by sewing him into his thigh. And months later, Dionysus was born from that thigh, half man, half miracle, fully confusing. He grew up on the road, raised by nymphs, wanderers, and outcasts. No marble palace, no throne, just endless forests, vineyards, and strangers who would soon become followers. Everywhere he went, he carried the same message: drink, dance, and remember who you are beneath the layers of control. His cult spread fast. It wasn't about power, it was about transformation. In the Bacchic rituals, people wore masks, shed their identities, and moved until they forgot their names. They believed that in losing themselves, they could touch something divine. It sounds wild now, but it was the earliest form of group therapy, except with more drums and fewer boundaries. Dionysus loved humanity because they broke easily. He understood that fragility wasn't weakness, it was proof of feeling. He saw how mortals worked, suffered, pretended, and held everything inside. So he gave them a ritual to let it out. Laughter, tears, shouting, everything forbidden by polite society became sacred under his watch. He was the god of catharsis, long before the word existed. But not everyone liked that. Kings banned his worship, fearing that joy could turn into rebellion. They were right. When you free a person from fear, you free them from control. So Dionysus punished those who tried to suppress him. One king mocked his rights and was driven mad, tearing apart his own family. Another was turned into a dolphin mid-escape, because apparently divine irony is best served aquatic. Still, his vengeance wasn't cruelty, it was balance. He reminded the world that suppression always ends in explosion. You can't cage the human spirit forever. At some point, it will sing or break. As I got older, I started to understand what Dionysus was teaching, that maybe the opposite of madness isn't sanity, it's honesty. Because to be human is to carry chaos inside, and pretending otherwise only feeds it. He taught through intoxication, but not just from wine. Theater was his temple too. Every performance, every mask, every story was a ritual in his name. The Greeks went to plays not just for entertainment, but for purification, to weep, to laugh, to watch tragedy burn itself into beauty. That was his kind of worship. Even in his wildness, he carried empathy. He found company among those no one else wanted, the poor, the broken, the outsiders. His entourage was made of satyrs, mad women, and misfits, dancing through forests like fragments of forgotten dreams. He didn't lift them above the world. He showed them how to survive inside it. And I think about him now, not as a figure of chaos, but of mercy. He's the God who looks at your trembling hands, your sleepless mind, and says, "You've been holding it together too long." Then he hands you a glass and tells you to breathe again. When I picture him, I don't see madness. I see release. Vines creeping through cracks in marble. Laughter rising where silence used to sit. Art born out of pain. He's the wildness that keeps the world from petrifying. The pulse behind every festival, every song that makes you forget yourself for a while. He's proof that joy, real joy, isn't a distraction from sorrow. It's what makes sorrow survivable. Maybe that's why Dionysus still lingers in the human imagination. Not because we all love wine, but because we all need moments when the mask falls off and the heart finally breathes. The Greeks saw him as both savior and destroyer, but maybe he's just the God who whispers, "It's okay to feel too much, because the moment you do, you're finally alive." So tonight, if you hear music where there shouldn't be any, faint, echoing, half drunk and full of joy, don't be afraid. It's just Dionysus wandering again, pouring one last cup for whoever forgot what it means to be free. Every family has that one sibling who refuses to come to dinner. In Olympus, that was Artemis. While the others built palaces in the clouds, she took one look at divine politics and said, "Hard pass." Then she disappeared into the forest with a bow and never looked back. She was the goddess of the hunt, of wild places and wild hearts, of moonlight and solitude. The Greeks feared her almost as much as they revered her, because Artemis didn't ask for devotion, She demanded respect. You could pray to her for a safe birth, for protection, for clean kills in the hunt, but cross her boundaries and you might find yourself on the wrong end of poetic justice. Her origin story was already proof she didn't need help from anyone. When her mother, Leto, went into labor, Hera, jealous and predictably dramatic, banned her from giving birth anywhere under the sun. Leto wandered in agony until she found the floating island of Delos, where she gave birth first to Artemis. And what did Artemis do next? Helped deliver her twin brother Apollo, newborn, midwife, and future moon goddess, all in the same hour. Some babies cry when they're born. Artemis cut the cord herself and said, "You're welcome." From that moment, she swore an oath of eternal independence. No marriage, no romance, no distractions. She would belong to no one and protect those who needed the same freedom. Her temple stood at the edges of civilization, where forest met field, where rules began to blur. She lived in motion, accompanied by nymphs, wolves, and the silver light of the moon. The moon suited her perfectly. It never begged for attention. It illuminated quietly, letting others believe the light was their own. The Greeks said she rode her chariot through the night sky, bow in hand, drawing silver arrows across the dark. She was light without warmth, beauty without invitation, calm that could kill if disturbed. You didn't flirt with Artemis. You apologized for existing too close to her. One mortal learned that the hard way. Actaeon, a hunter, accidentally stumbled upon her bathing in a forest stream. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong goddess. She turned him into a stag, and his own hounds tore him apart. Moral of the story: privacy settings are sacred. And yet, behind all that fierce solitude, there was compassion. Artemis protected women in childbirth, guarded young girls, and punished men who used power to harm. She was vengeance and mercy in equal measure. When Niobe mocked Leto for having only 2 children, Artemis and Apollo killed all but 2 of Niobe's own. Tragic, yes, but in Greek mythology, hubris had a punchline, and Artemis always delivered it clean. But not all her myths are sharp edges. There are stories of her helping farmers under the moonlight, guiding sailors by reflected silver, even calming beasts that others feared. To the Greeks, the wilderness wasn't chaos, it was balance. Nature could destroy or nurture, depending on how you treated it. Artemis was that duality personified. I like to think of her as the goddess of breathing space. Every time I step away from the noise, when the city hum fades and all that's left is quiet, I feel her there. Not watching, not judging, just existing beside me, like a reminder that solitude isn't loneliness. It's self-respect in its purest form. Apollo, her twin, ruled the day. Sunlight, reason, order. Artemis ruled the night. Instinct, mystery, emotion. They were balance itself. Clarity and chaos, brother and sister, logic, and intuition. He sought prophecy in words. She found it in silence. Together, they made the rhythm of existence, the inhale and exhale of the world. The more I think about Artemis, the more I realize how misunderstood quiet power can be. She didn't crave adoration. She didn't need temples built in her honor. Her devotion was in every calm moment, every untouched forest, every woman who decided she'd rather walk alone than follow the wrong path. That's divinity without ego. In modern terms, Artemis would be the friend who turns off her phone, takes a solo trip to the mountains, and comes back glowing while everyone else is arguing online. She's not aloof. She's centered. She knows that distance is the price of clarity. And sometimes, not answering is the most powerful answer there is. There's comfort in her kind of quiet. The world worships noise, opinions, ambition, applause. Artemis teaches something different, the holiness of stillness, the beauty of saying nothing, of moving through the world without disturbing it. She's the moon you don't look directly at, but still feel lighting your path. So tonight, if you catch a thin silver glow slipping through your curtains, take it as a sign. That's her, reminding you it's okay to disappear for a while, to rest, to breathe, to reclaim the part of you that no one gets to touch. You don't have to roar to be powerful. Sometimes, all it takes is quiet aim and a steady hand. If Olympus had twins that defined balance, it was Apollo and Artemis. He ruled the day, she ruled the night. He sang, she listened. He healed, she hunted. Together, they made the world breathe in rhythm. Apollo was everything bright, structured, and brilliant. The Greeks called him the god of music, prophecy, poetry, and medicine, the poster boy for golden perfection. When he walked, people claimed sunlight followed. When he spoke, even silence tuned itself to listen. He was the kind of god who never tripped on his own toga and always knew the answer before you asked the question, which made him insufferable at parties. But brilliance has its shadows. Apollo's confidence was so absolute, it often blurred into cruelty. He was the type to give you great advice, then curse you for not taking it fast enough. Take Cassandra, for example. He gifted her the power of prophecy. Then, when she rejected his advances, cursed her so that no one would ever believe her again. It's the mythological equivalent of fine, don't text me back. Still, Apollo wasn't all ego and overreaction. He was the god of order, harmony, and reason, a divine spreadsheet in a world of chaos. He ran the Oracle of Delphi, where priestesses inhaled strange vapors, muttered poetry, and somehow solved the universe's riddles. It was the ancient world's first advice hotline, with worse hold music. He also loved music, not as background noise, but as mathematics turned emotional. The lyre was his weapon, the air his battlefield. When he played, even the stones hummed in sympathy. The Greeks said his melodies healed the soul because they aligned it with cosmic order. And honestly, that tracks. He was the sound of things falling perfectly into place. Artemis, on the other hand, didn't believe in place. She believed in space. If Apollo was a temple, she was the forest outside it. Where he chased logic, she followed instinct. Where he sought answers, she asked none. She moved through the world like moonlight, never staying long enough to be caught. They balanced each other in ways neither could alone. When mortals prayed to Apollo for clarity, they often found Artemis's mystery waiting beside it. Because truth and instinct are twin halves of the same coin you just flip depending on what the night demands. Their myths intertwine often. Once, a jealous trick from Eros led Apollo to guide an arrow that killed Orion, the only man Artemis ever loved, or at least tolerated. When she saw what she'd lost, she placed Orion among the stars, forever chasing the dawn she could never reach. Even gods, it seems, learn grief the same way humans do. Too late. Apollo's love stories weren't much better. He pursued the nymph Daphne, who prayed to escape him and was turned into a laurel tree. He wore her leaves as a crown, a constant reminder that even perfection can drive beauty away. It's hard to root for a man who literally invented unrequited love and then accessorized with it. But that's what made them fascinating. They weren't good or evil. They were polarity itself, the eternal dance of logic and emotion. The Greeks didn't worship them for being flawless. They worshipped them because they explained us, how we swing between order and chaos, confidence and confusion, knowing and feeling. I like to imagine Apollo standing on a mountain top, bathed in sunlight, bow strung tight, every muscle a geometric truth. And miles away, Artemis under the moon, drawing her bow with equal focus, but softer hands. He aims for precision, she aims for peace. Both hit their marks. And maybe that's the lesson of their twinship. You can't live only in light. It blinds you. You can't live only in shadow. It isolates you. You need both. You need the voice that says think and the whisper that says feel. Apollo reminds me that knowledge is power. Artemis reminds me that silence is wisdom. And somewhere between them, the glare and the glow, the bowstring and the breath, is balance. So the next time you watch the sun sink below the horizon and the moon begin its climb, remember them. Not as rivals, but as rhythm. Light handing the world gently to shadow. One god ends the song, the other hums it back. Every family needs one person who doesn't start fires but keeps them burning. On Olympus, that was Hestia, while her siblings hurled lightning, cursed lovers, and invented entirely new species of regret. She sat beside the hearth, tending to the same flame that warmed both gods and mortals. She wasn't loud, she wasn't dramatic, and maybe that's why people forgot she was one of the most important deities of all. Hestia was the firstborn child of Kronos and Rhea, though technically also the last to return after her father swallowed and later regurgitated all his children. In that sense, she entered the world twice, which feels poetically fitting for a goddess of renewal. Her domain wasn't thunder or sea or war, it was the hearth, the fire that never sleeps. Every home, every temple, every city had a flame dedicated to her, small, steady, eternal. When travelers crossed a city's threshold, they were greeted first by her fire, not the ruler's throne. Because to the Greeks, civilization didn't begin with conquest or philosophy. It began with warmth. You could pray to Hestia for peace, for safety, for a loaf of bread that didn't burn, but mostly you didn't have to. She was already there, flickering quietly in the background, doing her job without applause. She was the embodiment of calm reliability, Olympus's version of, "Don't worry, I've got it." In a family where drama was the default, that made her revolutionary. Unlike her siblings, Hestia didn't crave attention. She didn't marry. She didn't feud. She didn't even sit on a throne, choosing instead to step aside so Dionysus could have one. The others fought over kingdoms and lovers. She ruled the small circle of light around a fire, and somehow that made her more eternal than any empire. The Greeks began and ended every meal with a prayer to Hestia. She was invoked before Zeus himself, which, given his ego, must have stung. But Zeus never complained. Even he knew that without her, no home, no family, no ritual could hold together. Her flame was what turned a house into a haven. It was the symbol of connection, the line of warmth that ran through every Greek household, every temple, every festival. She was the quiet pulse beneath all the noise. If you picture Olympus as an ancient family dinner, Hestia is the one who keeps refilling your cup while everyone else argues about who invented politics. She doesn't interrupt, she doesn't judge, but when she leaves the room, everyone notices the chill that follows. The Romans later called her Vesta, building massive temples to her flame. Vestal virgins guarded the sacred fire in Rome, believing that if it ever went out, the empire itself would fall. It wasn't superstition, it was symbolism. The flame represented continuity, duty, and the idea that civilization depended not just on strength, but on care. And care, Hestia taught, is not a weakness. It's maintenance disguised as love. I think about her often, the god who never left her post, who found holiness in repetition. In a pantheon obsessed with spectacle, she was the goddess of consistency. She reminds me that peace isn't the absence of noise. It's the quiet courage to keep something alive day after day, even when no one notices. Maybe that's why she never left the hearth. She didn't need to. Every spark of every fire was her temple. Every sigh of contentment after a long day was her hymn. And every bit of warmth between people, shared, fleeting, real, was her gift. So tonight, as your room dims and the air cools, imagine a single flame glowing beside you. It doesn't roar, it doesn't consume, it just burns, quietly, steadily, reminding you that peace doesn't need to shout to be heard. That's Hestia's way, the smallest light in the largest darkness, the still heart of Olympus. The clouds are thinning now. You can almost see the world below, the marble mountains, the shimmer of waves, the faint glow of 1,000 hearths still burning. Olympus fades, but not like a story ending, more like a dream shifting shape. The truth is, the Greeks never invented their gods to be worshipped from a distance. They built them as reflections, mirrors polished by myth. Zeus wasn't just thunder in the sky, he was the spark of ambition inside us, the will to lead, the hunger for control. Hera was pride, love, and jealousy tangled in one breath. Poseidon, the storms of emotion that crash through every heart. Hades, the acceptance we learn from loss. Athena still lives wherever logic wins over anger. Ares still rises in us when patience snaps. Aphrodite hides in every glance that lingers too long. Hermes laughs in every clever idea you can't explain. Demeter grieves in every winter of your life, and Persephone reminds you, spring always comes back. Dionysus still pours a little too much truth into every song. Apollo and Artemis chase each other across the sky, reason and instinct forever taking turns. And somewhere at the center of it all, Hestia's small flame keeps burning. It flickers in every home, every act of kindness, every moment you choose, calm over chaos. The Greeks didn't believe immortality meant living forever. They believed it meant being remembered. To speak a god's name was to keep them alive. And maybe, in the end, that's what all stories are for, to keep us from forgetting the parts of ourselves that built the world. Because Olympus was never just a mountain, it was the human mind, mapped in marble and lightning. Every storm, every fire, every act of love and revenge, it was us, learning what it meant to be alive. The myths didn't explain nature, they explained human nature. When I think about them now, I don't see distant gods in white robes. I see reflections. The jealous lover, the restless dreamer, the quiet healer, the wanderer, the maker, the poet. They're all still here, wearing mortal faces, rewriting the same stories in quieter ways. Because the myths never ended, they just changed names. So as the light fades and your breath slows, imagine yourself back on that mountain, above the clouds, the stars brushing against your skin. The gods are still there, waiting in the silence, Zeus murmuring through thunder, Athena in your thoughts, Hestia in the steady warmth of your chest. And as sleep gathers you, soft, slow, and infinite, remember this: You were never meant to bow before Olympus. You were meant to remember it, because every spark, every heartbeat, every act of courage or compassion is a whisper from that divine family, still echoing through time. The mountain fades. The clouds dissolve. And somewhere between dream and dawn, the old gods smile. Not because you believed in them, but because you finally believed in yourself.